Last week we or 2 weeks ago, we kind of finished up 38, talking about wisdom and the difference between us and the animals, how our thinking process, their thinking process is instinctive, and our thinking process is along the lines of wisdom. We have a process where we figure things out and look at things. Deer are not out there building skyscrapers and engineering computers. We are. Because God made us that way. That brings us over to 39. And let's read 1 through.
Do you know when the mountain goats give birth? Do you watch when the doe bears her fawn? Do you count the months till they bear? Do you know the time they give birth? They crouch down and bring forth their young. Their labor pains are ended. Their young thrive and grow strong in the wild. They leave and do not return.
Okay. Have you ever thought about, it's not so much with us, but you ever thought about how in the wild, how everything is perfectly timed? The does go into rut in October and November, and they bear their fawns in April and May. When the grass is the greenest and the clover is the tenderest, and the weather's changed. What would happen if the timing wasn't that way and they bore their young in December and January? What do you think would happen to the deer population?
You wouldn't have very many.
Go down.
Same with cows too. I mean, my neighbor down the road, most of his cows drop their calves in April, May, some in March. And that's all set up. We say Mother Nature takes care of it. Mother Nature. God took care of it. God set the timing. And God created everything so that it fit together properly for the seasons. It matched up with the seasons. And then by the time the summer's over and winter comes around again, the fawns have lost their spots, they've been weaned, and their mothers have run them off by the next rut, and they're able to take care of themselves. Do you think that happened by accident? Do you think that meticulous coordination, all the does in Indiana go into, all the bucks go into rut in the same month? There would be a 2-week difference between up around Gary and down around the Ohio River, but basically it all happens at the same time, and it all happens across the United States. If you go out to Wyoming on October 1st, the bucks are in rut. And when I hunted deer in Wyoming 12, 15 times, and you go out there, the antelope are all in rut, bucks are all in rut, everything gets done, then the blizzards come in. The blizzards pass, and you have thaw. And then about the end of March, 1st of April, all the does start having their fawns. And that's when the grass is the greenest in Wyoming. Wyoming normally is a brown state. They have a lot of rain and a lot of moisture during the winter. But along about May and June, the grass starts turning brown and going away. But right when those fawns are being born and the mother needs the milk, Wyoming's covered with green. It's a beautiful green lavender colored state in the spring. You ever been out there in the spring? I drove through there one time in the spring, and it's a beautiful state, totally different state. If you'd have just picked me up and popped me there and said, "Where you at?" I wouldn't have never said Wyoming, because I'm used to the brown and I'm used to the prairie and all the grass. After about June, all the cattle in Wyoming eat brown grass. The green grass is gone. And I think it takes 115 acres to graze one cow in Wyoming, because it doesn't keep replenishing itself. You get the spring grass, and that's it until next spring. So those farmers out there have to own 200,000 acres, 300,000 acres to maintain the cattle that they have. Do you think that all happened by accident? Do you think that is all Mother Nature coordinating things, this mysterious force that nobody can explain, but you know, it takes more faith to believe in Mother Nature than it does to believe in God. Have you ever considered that? People putting their faith in Mother Nature, talking about Mother Nature, talking about this coordination that Mother Nature takes care of. I think it's easier to believe in God, don't you? Amen or oh me? And basically he's saying here, I set this up and I'm in charge of it and I oversee it and I take care of it and I make sure that it works. If you're a Gnostic, the Gnostics believe that God created it, turned it over to us, and he went away, and we're on our own.
We'd have blown up by now.
What?
We would have blown up by now.
It's been a long time ago. I'd have been dead years ago if the angels hadn't been watching over me. And I tell you that for a fact. I'm pretty dumb when I was young, and sometimes I'm not real smart today. 5 through 8.
Who let the wild donkey go free? Bleh. Who let the wild donkey go free? Who untied his ropes? I gave him the wasteland at his home, the salt flats as his habitat. He laughed at the commotion in the town. He does not hear a driver's shout. He ranges the hills for his pasture and searches for any green thing.
Okay. Who do you think, where do you think the greater peace is? In a deer herd or in New York City? Who do you think got stressed out the other morning when I went out and a deer and her fawn were eating all my apples? And I walked out on the porch and she barked at her fawn and they walked across and went up into the woods. Who do you think got stressed out more?
You make mine with those apples? Because I'll keep watch. I will stand there. Keep the deer away.
I have been known to make apple wine.
Anybody want to do shifts?
Don't say my wife, I told you. And it was good. You know, they don't have boundaries to watch, and they don't have anything to guard. They just live their lives in peace. And he says here, the donkey looks at the town and he laughs. We get all stressed out. We're always worried about everything, and the grass has to be cut just right. Not mine. I'm sure my wife would rather have it different, but I kind of go along with my grandpa. I remember they lived in Georgia and they had a dirt backyard and a dirt front yard, and Grandma would go out and sweep the dirt. And I remember one time I was there and she said, "Well, why you got some help? Why don't you sow some grass in the front yard so that when people drive by, the house will look better?" And they had a really nice brick house. I mean, it was a nice brick house. And Grandpa looked at her and he said, "We don't need a front yard. We don't have a goat." Grandpa was kind of laid back, and you know, he if it wasn't going to give something back, he didn't see any sense in spending any money on it and maintaining it. You know, my daughter lives in a really upgrade housing project in Indianapolis, and she gets a call a week about, "You haven't trimmed your shrubs this week, and are you planning on mowing your grass soon?" And somebody noticed a little paint, and so every 2 weeks I go up there and work on her house and mow her yard. And Andy works about 80 hours a week. She's got 3 kids, and I don't mind, But we've got this thing going on up there where not only does my house have to be perfect, but your house has to be perfect too. And what did God say? God said the donkey stands and looks at the town and laughs at all the commotion. I wonder what our lives would be if we could just live in the garden and not have to maintain the front yard, not have to worry about the money in the bank. Just every apple tree belongs to everybody, and anybody that's hungry can pick an apple. What would the world be like if it was the way God wanted it, not the way we made it? I think there's a message here. It says he ranges the hills for his pasture and searches for any green thing, anywhere he wants to. And we fight our little patch of garden and fight the thistles, and the donkey just eats around and goes on with it. In our case, it would be deer, but in this case, in the Middle East, it would be the donkey or the camel. Okay, 9 through 12.
Will the wild ox consent to serve you? Will he stay by your manger at night? Can you hold him to the furrow with harness? Will he till the valleys behind you? Will you rely on him for his great strength? Will you leave your heavy work to him? Can you trust him to bring in your grain and gather it to your threshing floor?
Okay. How hard is it to break a horse, Jason?
It's not an easy task.
Does it ever get totally done?
No.
I know.
It's way harder to break the horse than it is for the horse to break the trailer.
I remember my uncle had some Arabians, and he'd have to re-break them every spring. He wouldn't ride them in the winter, and spring would come along, and he'd have to go out there and fight them and break them in the spring. I remember reading a story one time about how the Indians laughed at the white man because the white man would get on the bronco and break the bronco inside a corral. You know how the Indians broke their horses? They took them down to a deep hole in the river or in the creek. And so when the horse would buck or when the horse would fight the bridle or when he'd fight the rope or fight you on his back, if you got bucked off, you fell in the water. You didn't fall on a rock. And the water, have you ever tried to run through water? Have you ever tried to fight water or jump in water? I mean, it wore the horse out twice as quick. And they break a horse to ride in 2 or 3 days, and the cowboys were out there breaking their bones on the hard ground in the middle of the prairie. And the Indians used to laugh at the white man because of the way they broke the horses. And then we made a sport out of it and called it a rodeo.
It's more fun to watch though, than in the river, you know.
Yeah, it's more fun to watch your buddy break his arm.
Get gored by a bull.
Can you stay on for 20 minutes?
But we come along and we want to take what God made and we want to take His wildness and we want to tame it. We want it to serve us. And that's the way it was in the beginning, but we forfeited all that when we turned to sin. And God said, you're going to have to raise your crop by the sweat of your brow. You're going to have to fight the thistles. You're going to pay for what you've done. Because there's always a consequence for sin. Even if it's hidden that nobody knows but you, there's a consequence, isn't there? There's always the guilt if nothing else. And then it seems like the preacher's always preaching right at you.
Why do you keep looking at me when you say guilt and consequence?
I say this and I have to look at the ceiling. Every time.
You never look at Josh. Mr. Halo.
I can't help it.
No!
I used Josh just a minute ago. Or Jason.
Starting to get complex over here.
I get Josh in private. Josh is a big load. But anyway, where's the guilt in nature? Where's the guilt out there? Don, where's the guilt?
Thank you.
Now I can look at Jennifer, but I can't. Why do we feel that guilt? Where does that come from? I mean, if the preacher's preaching a sermon and he doesn't know me from Adam, and I'm in Wyoming, and I'm from Indiana visiting some church in Wyoming, he preaches a sermon that condemns me, and I get mad at him, where do you get the information from? Holy Spirit.